the Zodiac, the Zoo-diac, and the third lion. This is an ongoing research project investigating apparent shapes of creatures in the nebulae of the night, used for the purpose of tracking the passage of time. In this video, we will take a close look at what is called today the galactic bulge. Even though the Greeks described what they observed in the night sky as a milk circle, I assure you that it is not a bulging bubble of mammal milk. Instead, we are investigating a more ancient description of apparent shapes observed in the nebulae. These apparent shapes of creatures will, in turn, help us decode ancient astronomical calendar systems. In the previous two videos, we used ancient narratives and translated various names to locate a lion and the heart of a lion. Next, we found both a hand and a lion shape in the constellation region of Yod. We then noticed how they may relate to the tribe of Judah by tracing the Hebrew etymology of the word Yod. In this chapter, we will investigate the apparent shape of a third lion. It will not be a pixel-perfect shape. However, some of the details on each side help confirm that the scholars of the past observed this shape as a lion. Before we engage in researching the more ancient Hebrew descriptions, I'd first like to point out a few shapes that the Greeks referred to as the Zodiac. It is best to translate the terms into plain English in order for our minds to understand the regions that these ancient astronomers were describing. The Greek term Zodiacos kuklos simply means cycle of little animals or circle of little animals. Now, it seems the current modern understanding of this circle of animals is that of a set of 12 constellations along the ecliptic path of the sun, moon, and planets. What happens when we apply some of the ancient methodologies that we have deciphered from the Alef Tav calendar system? What will we find when we use the sunset horizon as a transversal line to bisect the Milky Way? During these rough initial estimates, I found I had to set the date in Stellarium to around -4,000 and to the Fertile Crescent for this particular exercise to work. Now, I'm going to do this quickly because the Zodiac is not the main focus of this study. I'll also translate the constellation names into English to demonstrate that it is really quite simple when you have the correct date and location on Earth. A similar set of descriptions is found in Babylonian, Egyptian, and later Greek and Roman cultures. Yet we will just translate the names to find the apparent shape. So we start back at the first lion and the heart of the lion. This aligns with a lion constellation. Just before the lion, we find a giant dark crab. Then we set the next bright ecliptic star onto the horizon. This star is called by the nations an ear of corn or grain. Then we follow the horizon and find that the dark nebula appears to have been interpreted by the Gentiles as the shape of an ear of corn or grain. I'll mark out 4 more regions before we take a closer look at them. As we move time ahead, we see there is a set of balance scales. There is a scorpion, an archer, and a goat. Now we set the galactic bulge parallel to the horizon, and then find the apparent shapes that match these simple descriptions. Balance scales. A scorpion. An archer. A goat. Now, I say that is quite the Zodiac. Right. For time's sake, I'll be skipping over the man that carries water, the fish, the ram, the bull, and the twins. We already had a look at the bull back in video 19. I'll eventually talk about these in future videos. I did find it interesting that this circle of little animals could be found, one after another, in sequence within the Milky Way nebulae. When the Greeks and later Romans conquered the Fertile Crescent, it appears that they translated the descriptions of these nebulae into their own native languages. There are a few observable properties of the night sky that seem to indicate that the Zodiac was not created by the Greeks or Romans. First, the homeland of the Greeks and Romans does not have as clear a view of the heavens as the desert regions of the Fertile Crescent. From Google Earth, you can easily see the green and desert regions or belts. Second, the homeland of the Greeks and Romans does not align well with the nebula shapes when using the horizon as a transversal line. Third, setting Stellarium to the dates of the Greek and Roman empires, we find that Earth's axial precession created a suboptimal alignment with the horizon. proper alignment requires an earlier date. Fourth, various cultures created artwork of the zodiac. Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, and later even Hebrew synagogues. However, when we compare the artwork to the shapes that can be observed in the nebulae, we find that the poses of the shapes in the artwork do not match the poses as observed in the nebulae. This would imply that the artists were not aware of the observable apparent shapes in the nebulae. I do find it difficult to stay on topic, especially when this research project had an unintended side effect of deciphering an ancient method of assigning simple common names to regions of space. Okay, let's get back to the main topic of this study. That is, using the Hebrew narratives to find clues to an ancient Alef Tav calendar system. The more clues we find, the larger the scope of this research project becomes. This particular lion shape was more difficult to pick out, but a few clues led me to this particular shape. Let's first look at the book of Job. We read in Job 38, "Can you hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the appetite of the young lions, when they crouch in their dens, or lurk in their lairs to lie in wait? Who provides food for the raven, when its young ones cry to God, and wander about for lack of food?" Job listed 2 different animals that were working to hunt and provide food for their young. So I was looking for both a lion and a raven shape, as well as something that might represent the food for their young. Here is an overlay of the lion shape. And here is the raven. This red nebula appears to represent the prey and the food. Well, that's only 3 matches and 3 verses. It seems like a bit of a stretch, doesn't it? Well, it does not end here, as these small apparent shapes string together into a larger context. At this point, we might as well have a spoiler of some of the upcoming videos. Here are several passages throughout these narratives that speak of a creature with 4 heads, one of which is a lion. For now, I'll point out 3 of the heads that are in sequence and leave the rest for a different video. Here's an apparent shape of an ox. Here is an apparent shape of a bird. Then this lion, of which we are now considering. The creature is described in detail in Ezekiel, and it has wings. It has wheels. in the book of Exodus, we find that this creature was said to be woven in with artistic design into the veil of the tabernacle.
The middle bar shall pass through the midst of the boards from end to end. You shall overlay the boards with gold, make their rings of gold as holders for the bars, and overlay the bars with gold. And you shall raise up the tabernacle according to its pattern, which you were shown on the mountain. You shall make a veil woven of blue, purple, and scarlet thread, and fine woven linen. It shall be woven with an artistic design of cherubim. You shall hang it upon the 4 pillars of acacia wood overlaid with gold, and their hooks shall be gold upon 4 sockets of silver. And you shall hang the veil from the clasps. Then you shall bring the ark of the testimony in there behind the veil, and the veil shall be divided for you between the holy place and the most holy.
The Jewish historian Josephus has, like many others, a description of what the objects of the tabernacle represented to him in his day. This was recorded around the time the temple was finally destroyed by Rome. It reads, "The curtain was embroidered with everything in the heavens except the Zodiac, or creatures." The point I want to draw from this is that he interpreted the veil as a description of the heavens. Yet I find his phrase regarding the creatures a bit difficult to understand. Was Josephus referring to the Greek or Roman interpretation of little animals seen in the heavens, but were excluded from the veil? Or was Josephus referring to the Hebrew interpretation of the creatures embroidered on the veil as recorded in the scriptures? There is yet even more to this lion. You will probably start to understand when I say that the scope of this will require more time to describe than what can be done in just one video. In Daniel 7, we find a description of nations as creatures or beasts: Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, the Greeks, and even the Romans. For those who read and work at deciphering the cryptic language of scriptures, it will be all too familiar how the narratives are spoken of in allegories or parables, leaving the reader to meditate on and research history in order to understand the author's intent. Here is a small sample of the text in Daniel in relation to the shapes seen in the night nebulae. Daniel spoke, saying, "I saw in my vision by night. The first was like a lion, and a man's heart was given to it. Another beast, a second, like a bear, had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. It is indeed interesting that Daniel records, "I saw in my vision by night." Now, I'm not going to affirm or deny that this is what Daniel was describing, as it will require more research to see if all the details can be found or if it is just a random chance that a few details can be cherry-picked out. And yet, overall, the apparent nebulous shapes are unrelated to Daniel's narrative. If you have been following along with this research project, following the videos in sequential order, you may start to get a sense of an ever-growing scope of this ancient calendar system. I appreciate the kind comments and the thought-provoking questions that have been left below each video. In the next video, we will investigate the apparent shape of a fourth lion and explore how it relates to various passages in Scripture. I assure you that these individual apparent animal shapes come together to form something even more remarkable. We will continue to practice finding apparent shapes in these celestial sands in order to better understand our place in the eternal passage of time.